Well, ladies and gentlemen, with this, it is now time to move on to our next session, which is the economics of esports from hypergrowth to maturity. Well, for this session, we're joined by our eminent speakers, Keith Harris, the chairman of a board of Semper Fortis. We've got Roberto Ramos, founder Ramos Family Office. We've got Magnus, Leppaniemi, the president of Esports Entertainment Group, and we've got Kevin Soltani, the CEO of Semper Fortis, who are joining us. Well, with this, I'd like to humbly welcome all our esteemed panelists. With this, the stage and screen is all yours.
Welcome, everybody, to another session at the World Esports and Gaming Summit 2021. We are saying it's based in Singapore, but we're virtual because of all things COVID. But hopefully for session 2, we'll see you back in Singapore or somewhere in Asia where we host most of our events. Our partner, Trescon, is an organizer, as well as ourselves, Semper Fortis. My name is Kevin Soltani from Semper Fortis. And we have a panel here today that I'm very proud of, and I'm very proud to have put together, and very fortunate that they've been very flexible in their timing to do this. We're from 3 different continents or countries, time zones, and here we are with Mr. Roberto Ramos, Keith Harris, and Magnus Leppaniemi. Did I say that right?
That works.
Yeah,
fine. Perfect.
And like I said, I'm gonna introduce them very quickly, but the topic for today's panel is the economics of esports from hypergrowth to maturity. Again, that second word of maturity is so important right now in our industry. So we look forward to learning a bit about that from our panelists. Quick introduction from each. Mr. Roberto Ramos is the founder and chairman of R2 Logitech Investment Fund, an early stage investment in logistics, but more recently R2 Entertainments, where most of his work is going to be done and will be done this upcoming season in Latin America. They're running a couple massive leagues down there. I'll let him explain about the region himself, but very proud to have met him through my affiliates, really all around the world, but through Dubai and England. So welcome, Roberto. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Kevin. Pleasure to be here.
Mr. Keith Harris, I must say, biasly and naturally, I'll be coming to you, Keith, is my current chairman at Semper Fortis Esports, but his background comes very wide background in investment banking, but for the purposes of today's conversation, he was the chairman of the Football League here in England, the director of Wembley Stadium, which was the company who owned Wembley Stadium Limited, and the chairman of Everton Football Club, who now we have the ambassador, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who's a current leading goal scorer there as a Semper Fortis ambassador. Thank you, Keith, for being with us.
My pleasure. Nice to be with everyone.
Magnus has a very long esports and gaming history and is presently now with Esports Entertainment Group. Magnus comes from before a global sales manager, director at WeHype, and previously with DreamHack as their North American sales director. Now you are in the vice president role at EEG. Everybody knows you guys as a household name. In the last about 18 months, you've done fantastic work. Can't wait to hear from you. Thank you, Magnus.
Thanks for having me here today.
And I'll again just kick it off with that theme, which all 3 of these companies, if you haven't heard of or researched, or these groups of companies that these gentlemen work with, come from a traditional sports background or involvement. Right now, a lot of great things EEG is doing with almost every team in North America. Now you guys seem, and now you've moved to collegiate. So that's fantastic. And Roberto, you in Latin America. But Keith, you come from a sports background, as in your entire life came from the management of and business of. You know, esports is drawing a lot of comparisons naturally to sports, but the business has seemed to be lagging behind. To jump right into it, does this look like a moment where the phrase that gets thrown around, esports is like in the 1990s, of the English Premier League, right before the franchising came and the explosion of media rights? Do you agree with that? Do you feel that way right now as an esports chairman now?
It's interesting, you know, you started your introductions with using the word maturity. And whilst this is by no means a mature sport and mature business, let's be clear, it's not in its infancy either. So I think esports, which has been tagged on to a lot of physical sports, the ones that we know best, I guess, football, Formula One racing. This week, although I'm actually on vacation, which is why I'm probably looking a bit too relaxed, for which I apologize. But I read whilst on a remote island in Greece, which is a testimony to how brilliant technology is, which is at the heart of an awful lot of what we're doing in esports. I read that, but rugby, a game played in very few countries seriously, rugby is now going into esports in the same way as football has done, our soccer has done. And of course, for those familiar with the United States, it's a very, very popular pastime in respect of university education. That's catching on in England. It is catching on in England or in the United Kingdom. It's also catching on in Germany, in France, other parts of Europe, and inevitably elsewhere. So I think it's wrong to say we're on the cusp. I think we've gone past the cusp. This is an industry, a business sector, which over the last couple of years has generated substantial sums in terms of revenue. And it was interrupted by this shock that we all had. Every single country in the world massively affected, typically negatively by the pandemic, by the COVID-19. The awful thing to say is that, and forgive me if I touch on any nerves here, but the awful thing to say is that in some respects, it has encouraged people involved in esports that couldn't go to tournaments in the same way. They couldn't go physically and watch, but they could do more and more and more online, hence technology. They could do more and more alone in their bedrooms, especially the youngsters. Kevin, when I think about our team and the youngster, he's 16 for goodness sake. Children of 16 haven't matured. Again, your phrase maturity, and yet he is regarded as one of the best. And the same applies in some physical sports. You're getting youngsters, you're getting encouragement from parents. And what happened in physical sports is that something like 30 odd years ago, there was an explosion of media interest. And that gave rise to an explosion, which has never quite caught on to the media interest explosion. It hasn't been volcanic, but it's been a very steep growth in respect of commercial income. And some of that is gambling related, some of that is sponsorship related. And then of course, there's been attendance. And for those of us who have grown up either playing and or watching physical sports, there is no replacement whatsoever, ever can be, for sitting there, standing there, watching things happening live. And I reflect back, Kevin, to the quarterfinal that we went to when we beat one of our rivals, whose name shouldn't be mentioned, I guess. And there we were in a bar in central London. There were quite a lot of us. We were screaming, we were shouting, we were winning, which helps. But then I read afterwards, because it's what you sent me because of my question. There were 200,000 people who logged on from all over the world to watch this. So I think the future here lies in tandem, part of it being the technology. And when I go back 10 or 20 or 30 years, technology has grown so much. It's expanded, it's accelerated. We're now thinking of cars without drivers. We're thinking about supermarkets without checkouts. We're thinking technology. And yet we all love entertainment, and we've missed the leisure business of live sport. And I think this is a slightly lengthy answer, but I come back to the cusp of it, because you used the cusp.
Right.
So I think we've gone past the cusp of this being an immature sport, but by no means is it mature. We have huge growth to come, which is the excitement.
Yeah, you mentioned on passing that cusp, and something that maybe just withholding the explosion part. albeit COVID and keeping people at home and children away from school and having more time in front of the computer, obviously gave gaming, esports, all things encompassing a bump up. Media has been a big question. Media rights, media images that, and all of the big names that haven't come in. Magnus, you also work with a lot of professional sports teams, now college, and that one thing they do well, and they've been doing well from day one, which is why the NFL is the NFL and the NBA is the NBA, is media. And the way they produce it, sell it, and now those packages are so big that they've become bigger than the leagues, and so they dictate what's going on. And we haven't seen that quite yet, other than I'd say Riot Games and League of Legends. But how do you feel that will shift or needs to shift as so esports to become more mature?
As I said, I think mature. I think esport is how esport is structured and set up today is that you go to an event, you arrive at 10 in the morning and you leave at midnight. It's not that if you look at an NFL game, that's 3 hour long. The broadcast maybe 3.5. It's in size bites that the networks can actually do there. Esport hasn't really adapted to it because you're trying to run as many matches as you can during a weekend, and then it goes into like 12 hours there. That's where I think esport needs to find a way, condense the thing or be a little bit more, as I say, bite-sized. I think what Riot is doing, but also what Activision is doing is kind of play weekends and then matching happening there, like those home and away games makes a lot of sense. That's making sure that it actually fits to the TV. What the big ones are doing, if you go look at the majors coming up in Stockholm right now, that's going to be 3 days. It's going to be, 20 matches. How do you actually condense that into a 3 hour shows, wherever? Because everybody, as I said, want to see this live. As soon as you go from, to VODs, it's not the same experience, not that live experience. You want to have that. So I think for esport, we need to find a way to actually condense this and find a way, maybe, I think leagues could be that, or another setup there. So when that's going to happen, then we're going to see the big players going in there. They're going to actually be able to monetize, and the tournament owners can also monetize because they can sell something there that's doable for the networks, so they can bid on that. So it's a little bit of it's not maturity. It's a little bit of a different setup, I would say. How do you run this tournament in there? And the NFL, the Premier League. I wanted the Premier League and NFL, the best ones to monetize the broadcast rights they have. That's how they finance the whole business in doing that, and maybe to pay this kind of monster salaries for these star players in there.
Right. You mentioned more leagues, more franchising opportunities. The thing about that is that the brands in esports tend to go just the way of even sports. There's an 80-20 split where 80% of the brand dollars are going to 20% of the teams, and the other 80% of the teams are left hungry and they can't make it or survive. So the famous quote is, just in esports, survive 5 years and you will have made it, kind of like a small business. Yeah. And that really does fall on the media rights, because even when you have media rights that come in and they pay those dollars, the 10th place team can at least bank on X dollars as long as, or if they don't get relegated in other leagues. Are you seeing the media kind of come in slowly, like you said, as we add more leagues, Magnus, as we get involved, as it becomes, like you said, maybe not more mature, but more set up? Is media still staying on that topic a missing factor in your opinion?
Yeah, I think media is a missing factor. I think also sponsorship is a part of these teams, but I think that's coming more with the teams take a bigger place in this ecosystem also. The leagues, the tournament operators like ESL and DreamHack or PGL, wherever, they need to have the teams in there. If you look at the Premier League, it is actually split between all the teams part of the Premier League. That wasn't the case. You go 5 years back, media rights was sold by the tournament ops. They took all the money. Now they're actually starting to share with that, and that's what we need to find. That's what we need to build, so the teams have some kind of economics, not based on performance all the time. You don't have to win. That's a good thing that should be there, but that can't be the only thing. That we don't build a sustainable ecosystem if you just, as I said, financing or giving prize money to the first 10 or 5 teams. That's where they make money of that. That's what we have right now. That's what, as I said, we need to change that. I know there's ESL has been looking at that for a Pro Tour. I know you have Flashpoint is looking at that, and Riot has been, I think, the best one actually sharing that revenue with them. So it is on this way, but we need to move that a little bit faster so we can have a bigger ecosystem, because I think we need more than 5 teams to follow and do that. It needs to be a bigger one. If you look at Premier League, whatever league, La Liga, whatever, it's a lot of teams in there. So, but the ecosystem needs to be better for the teams to monetize that.
And segueing from that ecosystem comment, Roberto, the ecosystem in LATAM is being built as we speak. There's LATAM teams, esport teams that have been around for a long time. Brazil's produced some great teams in League of Legends. Mexico is producing good League of Legends quality product. Excuse me, but the league and the franchising opportunities still lack. And again, what works in reverse in LATAM, and so I'd say like LATAM and Asia are opposite to the West, as in Europe and America, is that your numbers are incredible, but the CPM rates and the rates just through advertisers is obviously 1/10. So you might get millions more views for 1/10 the payment from the advertisers. And again, this is just based on the media segue, but based on the growth of the leagues. We've seen what happens when a footballer, again, traditional sports, and Sergio Kun Aguero started a club team. He became bigger than most of the other esports club teams backed by sports teams. And the media is now backing that. Going along the line of the media and the legitimacy of the leagues, does LATAM need its own league or leagues, and not to share in other people's success and send a regional? We still don't have a outside of League of Legends many representative slots for some of the tier 2 games, or even tier 1 games. Is it based on the infrastructure, or is it again the support from the media and other people at the top?
I think it's a great question. It's a combination of all the factors. No? We are kind of behind, as you mentioned, what has happened in the West, and the ecosystem has not developed as fast as we wanted. And then we had 2020 in the middle, so that kind of freezed the whole thing. What we came up with was a solution, which we are about to make it happen, and to see how viable it will be, which we are very positive it will be very viable. And it's a combination of what the publisher can bring, what the teams can bring, and what the media can bring. I think if we combine all those three together, we should have a great outcome. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been an easy sale, but the one thing that we have here, and we have tied up with Supercell Brawl Stars game, putting together 13 of the main brands, main teams, soccer teams in LATAM, which in LATAM, soccer is religion, so to say. And so the fan base is great. We decided also to go mobile because most of the economics and the demographics told us that we should go to a mobile game. And then we had this idea on how to help the teams monetize and to do it on a more fair way. And Supercell came with the idea after having that initiative with the Paris Saint-Germain back in 2019 to develop skins in the game, so they can share the profits or the sales of the revenue from the in-game sales with the teams. So that's very innovative. The teams welcome that initiative because as we don't have any numbers to share now still with media, with the media concerns, so that they jump in and put the money that they put in other events. I think this has created a lot of traction just to have the teams more involved from one side, using not only their brands but their players. They're compromised to go social media with their players and bring that traction throughout all their venues, so to say. And we are very excited about what we can bring in terms of developing our own ecosystem and not depending. We are already talking to another 3 publishers for leagues next year, because the numbers are there, like you said, more than 450 million users of cell phones here, 30% or 40% of them playing gamers. No? So it's just to find the real ins and the combination of the 3 factors that will make this happen.
You know, you mentioned 13 professional football teams are partnering with a North European sponsor for a mobile game. You know, this is beautiful, and that's not only progression in one sentence, but it sure is making the world a very small place. And LATAM always, I thought, within gaming can kind of leapfrog the mistakes of some of the Western countries or Eastern that have done that in esports because of how quickly it's moving. And as you see with crypto companies, not only investing in partnerships, but tokenized gaming aspects within stores, team stores, different worlds, big populations of Turkey, Argentina, Indonesia, which are, and one of those being, you know, LATAM, Brazil. These are large, highly technical third world countries that are gamers at the core, right? And so build it and they will come is what the notion is in LATAM, but I think the sponsors have taken notice to that. Would you agree that we need to build it and they will come, which is what you guys are doing with the leagues with Supercell?
Yeah, that's
because the teams are hungry. Those 13 football teams are hungry. Very reminds me, Keith, of our United Kingdom, UK. One of the only successful things that happened, there's been a couple, but you know, the Overwatch League eventually failed. And the one consistent for a couple years now is the E-Premiership. It's a low-level tier 2 esport in FIFA, but it's still successful, and it's still the most watched esporting event consistently. You know, Rocket League has its days, and Fnatic, when they play, there's a representative that flies the flag, but England and the UK doesn't have much else to look forward to. So Keith, do you also agree? And in the UK, similar to LATAM, it's build it and they will come. And
yes.
And there must be a hesitancy, right? Of naturally.
Look, there's no surprise that there might be a little impatience that the build up to this is a little slower than some might have imagined. But look, it's taken in the terms of physical sport, whether it's LATAM or it's Europe or the United Kingdom, now that we're not part of Europe, according to some people, it's taken 150 odd years for the sport to mature from being a sport to being a business, and the business is playing sport. So the media interest really that took off was actually only 30 years ago. Before then, the players' wages were very low. People played because it was a pleasure. You know, we all read with joy over the last few days that the world's legend of a physical footballer, Pelé from Brazil, has undergone and survived some serious hospital treatment. Now, here's a man that personifies playing because he loved what he was doing and was the best in the world at doing it. He didn't do it for the money. So I think the fact that commerce is now playing such a major role in all sports, everywhere in the world, massively important. And large parts of it are because of, you know, social media carrying commercial ads and all the rest of it. You know, when I look back when we were starting our business, Kevin, I looked at one stat that said 10 years ago, social media had revenues of $1 billion. Today it has revenues of $3 billion. You know, I mean, that's a huge increase. So there shouldn't be any impatience. I think we're progressing in esports very quickly. And the reason that we're not seeing more teams, and we are seeing plenty, let's be clear, the reason we're not seeing more teams in the United Kingdom, which is after all the most successful in many, many, many respects, the most successful football league in the world. The Premier League is the one that everyone looks up to. It's the reason that so many players from Latin America and Asia and Europe and Africa want to come and play, because it is so successful. It is the very fact that these teams are playing flat out to make sure they do their best, and they're looking for commercial opportunities. And what is interesting to me is that there are two initiatives that have taken off. One more recently than the other, and that is women. What is, I called it ladies, I was told off, is women's football, which is now a major initiative. In the United States, it was the only way they played soccer for a long while. It's a major initiative today. And the other is esports. So we can count maybe half the Premier League now have esports teams. They are looking at it as an adjunct to their physical sports activities. Look, yeah. This is not going to catch on. This has caught on. Right. It's a question of how quickly it grows.
You mentioned the commercial aspect of it, and the commercials. We talked about media, and now we're talking about the jerseys, the activations, the sponsorship, the promotion, and you're seeing a lot of crypto companies do that. But before that, gambling companies have been notorious to sponsor kits, teams, players, activations. And now in esports, it's very similar, and it's a very popular thing, not to just gamble on red and black anymore, but to do kind of experiential gambling on fantasies, esports. And because esports is so closely regarded to the younger populations, and naturally betting is there in college dorm rooms and such. I know, Magnus, you guys, one of your earliest businesses and one of your most successful is in that space. Are you still seeing that as large part of your roadmap? And is it still ultimately very looking successful as more and more states legalize, and as you go globally, potentially more licenses around the world to do the same thing? Or maybe it's hit a peak of some sorts in your eyes?
No, I would say esports betting is just at its infancy. It hasn't been developed. I think esports betting is going to look different compared to the traditional sports book. And I think all esports betting is more live betting than it's actually that kind of pre-match betting that's in there. Esports has a more live component thing there that we need to develop better and do that. We haven't, not any, I would say, operator has done that so far. For us, esports betting is an important part. As I said, we think that's a way for us to differentiate from the big ones in the US, the competitors we have. So we think it's a good way, and we see a huge growth in there to do that. We want to, as I said, we're expanding. We open up our first the Y in New Jersey coming up here pretty soon, and we have applied for a couple of more licenses. We want to grow that business, and it's an important.
Is that a physical location?
It's an online. It's online for us. We're looking at, of course, at physical locations also. Yeah. But right now it's an online with Y, what we're doing there. But we're looking at physical locations to do that. But once again, it's US, and it's a little different compared to the UK, where you have one license for the whole country. Now it's actually you need 48 licenses instead. Yeah. In some states, it's even forbidden. And so, that it's a different how you do that, and pretty expensive also in there. But we want to expand that. We are, as I said, we are also owning our tech. So we can develop new products that in the betting space for esports. So we think it's important. So we're looking to do that also, as I said. But and that's mainly around the live betting, because I think live betting is the key thing for this. It's not that pre-match betting where, you go in and bet Fnatic's going to win over Ninjas, and that you put that one in, and then two for another one, and then you leave the site. I think betting has so much more to offer, and you're actually doing that a little bit on destination place. That's how we see it, and that's how we're developing also this one.
And just going along the line of that, sorry, Keith, did you want to say something?
No, I was just agreeing. I said interesting.
I mean, in the UK, it is so different, because when you have a license, and of course, very deep pockets, because opposite to America, there are obviously very large gambling houses, but they're mafia-based, corporate guys, very top to bottom style, been Vegas for a long time, been Jersey City, and now it's kind of breaking down with the advent of Penn Gaming and and you guys over there, as we'll see what we can do. And maybe we'll meet you on the middle somewhere in the UK, but it's such a different experience. Like you said, it's you can do it more physically based here, which is so opposite to esports. And just to bring in LATAM, because they are more on the side of the Western, being online, I wouldn't say gambling maybe is the natural way for LATAM, Roberto, but gambling in the sense of, I know how excited kids, teams, and such companies like even Aguero's team want to do rewards via tokens. They don't need to be crypto, but they can be tokenal rewards and gambling based versions of that. And it doesn't need to be, again, cryptocurrency or a peso per se, but a reward style token that is given back. And I know the Latin American community is very similar to the Indonesian and Filipino communities. They breed off of that because of the community that they can do. They can share those coins. They can, because remittance costs are just hell in a handbasket. And it's a very beautiful reward system too. Do you see that as a progression for you guys down there, for your league or teams?
And you have to consider that because of the demographics, all of them are aspirational. So I actually started in this space with a platform that could tokenize the time you play and your trophies, right, into a digital coupons, which you could go and go to the store and get something physical, right? So it was not really betting, but it was how this aspirationality can bring you to be more competitive and win tokens. And like you said, no, it's not really betting, but it's really pushing the competitiveness of the gamers, no? So of the amateur community, which will eventually evolve into nice spheres in the professional scene, no? And in the esports scene. So I think we are, like you said, we are taking advantage of the leapfrog that will be produced here, go through not to the same hiccups that the West had to go through in developing this whole thing, but we can take advantage, and we are and this is like the skins that we develop in the together with Supercell in this league, that will eventually go into tokenizing different models for different leagues. No?
For the last question, I'll just throw it up, pop up, whoever wants to take it, all three, one, none. I hate making predictions. I hate when they say in 5 years or in 10 years. But to be honest, we do have to think that way, especially if you have any assets within actual esports like we do in teams. Roberto, you do in leagues. Magnus, you do in assets which span across players' leagues. And I don't know if specifically you own any teams as EEG, but you don't own any teams, right? Yeah.
No, so we can't do that. We can't do that.
Oh, because right, obviously, sure. So there you go. Because of the gambling aspect, friends and listeners, they obviously can't own any esports teams, but they have exposures to assets. Making a prediction of sorts, or that in 5 years, anybody or all can take it. Just a quick answer, 20 seconds. In 5 years, will the media rights, because I'm very curious because that's where the largest dollars will come from and the legitimacy. Will the media rights come in as they did with the sports scene, hand over fist, because they don't ask how much, they ask where to put it, and it's a blank check sometimes. In 5 years, are we going to get that in each of your regions? And I'll start with you, Roberto, in LATAM.
I think we will. There's one thing that is happening here is that the traditional media still doesn't understand the esports and the gaming, how to manage it. So we are now partnering, and we will be announcing that hopefully very, very soon. That I'm being the strategic partner for a very large media concern, global concern, and be their strategic partner to develop their gaming solution in the region, and eventually not only in the region, because they are global. So it seems that we can be of help to them so they understand better. And because the other thing is that it's not only them, but how they sell that to their customer base, to their sponsors, right? And how they package the whole thing. One of the things that one of the challenges is the sponsorship in the game. How you go through this advertising in the game, which is totally different than the physical sports. So there's many challenges, but I believe that they are the ones that are into it. We just heard about Netflix and their gaming strategy that will be set up as of next year, and we will be hearing that more and more from the traditional media concerns that will evolve into this. So I do believe that in 3-4 years we will be at a very different moment.
I said it was a pop-up, but then I went straight to Roberto, and I'll still keep it pop-up for the last two, if either or both of you have any comments.
I wouldn't say no. That is not. It's going to grow. It's not going to be the biggest one. I think it's still sponsorship and market. The market is the biggest. I think the ones that's going to explode and be is the data. How do actually the data of the players, what the games they're playing, that's going to be the biggest driver. That's the new oil for the business. Media rights, definitely. But, we need to check out how the formats, how we play the games. But data, that's the key thing of doing that. So the more data you have going, that's going to be the new thing. That's going to explode. Give that a little bit more time. It's going to be. So that, I would say, media rights definitely going. It's going to be, I guess, 100%, 200%. But compared to data, how that's going to be the bigger one. That's going to be the major driver here going forward.
I would add just briefly, Kevin, one thing to that, and that is at the end of the day, you have to look at the consumer demand. How does the consumer want to view this sport? If it's going to be online, it's going to be one way. If it's going to be by traditional methods, and there's every sign now that the young, and let's be clear, whilst there may be increasingly older people watching this, this is a sport and activity to be played by younger people. I think you've got to assume that it's the younger folk that will focus on this, and how do they watch their entertainment? And if it's going to follow the lead of physical sport, it's a very different way from watching it in bars on TV screens. It's going to be digital. It's going to be driven by data, and it's going to be on devices. If I hold this up like these or the equivalent thereof in the future.
It's to wrap it all up. I actually, I think we all agreed to disagree because the media is important, but you're absolutely right, Magnus, in the data, because not only is that going to be the driver, which you've seen firsthand from the gambling side and the sheer numbers that are coming in, but the fact that this is an incredibly young population that isn't so young anymore when you add in a 15-year-old is now 18, still gaming, right? But it's way two different lifestyles from 15 to 18. So that data is incredibly important because things are moving so quickly. And just a segue, maybe it'll help the media rights shake the tree a bit and all things media and bring those dollars in. If there's any final comments, it's open, but I really appreciate your time. We have gone over, so I do appreciate all of your times. As usual, these conferences are meant to educate, and I've always come here to learn, and I've learned something new. I appreciate everybody for your time, Roberto, Magnus, and Keith. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you on another panel. Listeners, friends, please do check out each of their projects and companies. Like I said, this is a very global panel. 3 different countries, I believe, through almost 3 different continents, or maybe Magnus and Roberto, you're on the same, but looking forward to hearing more in the journey of each of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Well, what a fantastic panel discussion that was on the economics of esports from hypergrowth to maturity.